first day, man was granted a soul, and with it clarity. On the second day, upon earth was planted an irrevocable poison, a soul-devouring demon, an entity known as the Old One, a creature that could spell the doom of the world itself. Long ago, mankind faced extinction at the hands of demons, commanded by the Old One. At this point in history, the world was united by the use of soul arts, the ability to manipulate the souls of others. Whether it be to gain strength or heal oneself, the potential was limitless. This magic is empowered by the Old One itself. If mankind seeks to displace this entity, then they must abandon the use of soul arts. If the soul of a being is claimed, they lose their mind. A land of barren souls, inhabited by mindless beings, is swallowed by the fog and banished to infinite darkness, left as prey for the Old One. The Old One is a vast chasm of nothingness, a being with an insatiable appetite for the souls collected by its legion of devout demons. Mortals cannot comprehend the nature of the creature, only that it exists for a singular purpose, to devour the souls of the living.
In the distant past, under benevolent rule, the world was united owing to the soul arts. Until a lust for power caused the awakening of the Old One.
Mankind's over-reliance on the soul arts caused the beast to awaken. The Old One was roused from its slumber, and a colourless deep fog engulfed the horizon. Humanity quivered under the heels of demons. Mankind faced a slow and steady extinction. To counter the Old One, a faction of humans banded together. After the loss of innumerable souls, and half the world was erased by the fog, they were able to lull the Old One back to his deep sleep. In order to preserve what little remained of the lands, the territories were divided amongst 6 elders, one to the king of a small yet diligent land, one to the king of the burrowers underground, one to the wise queen of the great ivory tower, one to the chieftain of lost and ill-fortuned souls, and one to the shaman of the tempest-worshipping shadowmen. Entry to these lands is granted by an archstone, objects placed at nodes across the earth. There exists a 6th archstone, one belonging to the giants, though this gateway remains broken, leaving the land isolated from the world. As for the Old One, the colossal entity was contained below the Nexus. To ensure the creature remained unconscious, the use of soul arts were banned, though few can resist the allure of such power. Soul arts were integral to society, as it served as a source of healing and power for all. Without it, many were lost. This video is brought to you by Project Orochi. If you're not aware, Project Orochi is a streetwear clothing brand inspired by Japanese mythology and art, with some designs having references to beloved video games including Demon's Souls, Sekiro, and even titles beyond the From Software umbrella. To share one of our favourites, take a look at these designs inspired by Demon's Souls. In particular, we really like the Flame Lurker hoodie. Now you can die repeatedly to your favourite bosses while wrapping their merch. Not only do they provide game-inspired products, but also timeless original art, such as the Fisherman, Twin Tigers, and the minimalist but elegant classic Orochi design, just to name a few.
Today we have a special offer just for you guys. Use the promo code SOULS to get 10% off your order. If you're based in North America, you're also eligible for free shipping. Please take a look at Project Orochi's Instagram and drop them a follow to stay up to date with their latest releases. You can also participate in their monthly giveaways and community discussions. Once again, a major thank you to Project Orochi for sponsoring this video.
Those who saved mankind formed the Order of Monumentals, with the displacement of souls and the fog distorting existence itself. These half-living sentinels were needed to maintain the fabric of reality. Unfortunately for the Monumentals, much of their faction would perish, leaving only a single sentinel to watch over reality. Man's view of history is often short-sighted. Without the Monumentals, much of history fell into myth. Humanity once again was doomed to repeat the mistakes of their forebears. In regards to the Archstones, they were forgotten and are now left for the might to gnaw at. Much of this tale revolves around the kingdom of Boletaria, an industrious city founded by old King Doran, a mortal who ascended to the status of a demigod. He wielded the Northern Regalia, a powerful armament. Even Bulutarian royal family legend scarcely mentions its origins, but it is believed that a malicious force left it behind in this world, along with the Old One, a weapon formed by combining the two legendary swords known as Soulbrand and Demonbrand. The latter is a white blade made to be wielded against demons, held for generations by the Bulutarian royal family. The less demonic the soul of the wielder, the more powerful this blade becomes. On the other hand, to utilize Soulbrand and harness its full potential, one must embrace demonic power. Once the old king's goals were accomplished, he confined himself and the two blades in the Bulutarian Royal Mausoleum, serving as a judge for any who would enter. One must pass the test of the ancient king if they are to wield the fabled swords of Bulutaria. The key to the mausoleum was left under the stewardship of the Bulutarian family. Time will show us that this was an unwise choice. After a time, King Gallant XII was crowned king. Opening the mausoleum, he retrieved the notorious blade, Soulbrand. The closer the soul of the wielder is to a demon, the more powerful this blade becomes. No wonder it was chosen by old King Gallant. A clear indication that Alant's soul, unlike his predecessor, Doran, is more akin to that of a demon than a human. Throughout his reign, King Gallant, by channeling the power of souls, brought unprecedented prosperity to his people. Bulutaria came to be known as paradise on earth. However, this would not last. The notion that history is cyclical rings true, as once again the Old One is awakened. The once benevolent ruler grew wistful with age, and inner turmoil raged within the king. Is there a point to prosperity if life is ultimately a state of suffering? Arriving at the conclusion that the world is filled with pain and anguish, Alant abandoned hope. He shunned the monumentals and forged a pact with the Old One, electing to fight poison with poison. With the being awakened, Alant journeyed to its heart, forming an unholy union, one which warped his body beyond recognition. Using his newfound power, he conjured a demonic reflection, stationed at the peak of his tower. It would rule Bulutaria in his name and image, ensuring the demon hordes consumed the living and gathered their souls. Archdemons, powerful demonic entities, were stationed throughout various planes of existence, acting as generals in their respective domains. They were extensions of the Old One's will. No longer confined by his rigid station of lordship, Alant could now pursue his true goal. He believed that God created the Old One as a mercy, to put an end to the tragic realm of existence that is humanity, viewing death's embrace as the only salvation for mankind. A barbaric and selfish act that he viewed as mercy, an unfortunate conclusion for the once mighty and revered Alant, who became nothing but a false king. As the demons ran rampant in Bulutaria, the fat officials gained favour with Alant. These sadistic ministers oppressed the masses with sly grins. Their weapon of choice, the weighty crescent axe, displayed their unbelievable strength. Residents of Bulutaria despised them, men who grew fat from the suffering of others. As the kingdom was shrouded in fog, Bulutaria's army crumbled. Its loyal soldiers, whose souls were stolen and now controlled by the demons, remained dutiful. In their current mindless state, they still defend the palace from intruders. Amongst the ranks of the army were stalwart knights, warriors of true vigour. The cuirass of the Bulutarian knights is emblazoned with the image of the sun, as proof of their commission from the king. Sadly for the hoplites, they were reduced to the lowest of life forms, living slimes. Covert operations were carried out in the shadows by the Imperial spies. Their orders came directly from the king himself. Victims would seldom see the rogues before it is too late. However, it is doubtful that any of Bulutaria's forces are used in a capacity beyond defending the nation from soul-hungry adventurers. History speaks of three fabled legends, heroes of Bulutaria.
Alfred, the Tower Knight, Metas, the Penetrator, and the brave tribesman Longbow Ulan and his fearsome legions.
Unfortunately, these great warriors were corrupted. Longbow Ulan became a demonic entity known as the Phalanx. Alfred warped into the colossal Tower Knight, and Metas, Knight of the Lance, was transformed into the Penetrator. An elite order existed under the king, known as the Twin Fangs. This duo consisted of Valifax and Bior. Defying his oath to the king, Valifax broke free from the fog and told the world of Boletaria's plight, that the old King Alant had roused the Old One. He spoke of the enticing power of the demon souls. Each time a demon claims a human soul, the demon's own soul is invigorated by the life force, and the power of a mature demon soul is beyond human imagination. The legend spread quickly, enticing many to approach the accursed land. Bior remained devoted, staying behind to defend the honour of the true King Alant, believing the allegations against his king were mere fabrications woven by jealous conspirators. The allure of power enticed many adventurers to make the perilous journey to Boletaria, the most prominent of which were as follows: Yurt, the Silent Chief, Skurva the Wanderer, the Sixth Saint Astraea and her knight Garl Vinland, Saint Urbane, and Sage Frake the Visionary. Saint Urbane is a pilgrim of God and a devout believer in miracles. He puts his faith in his Lord, that prayer and worship will rid Boletaria of the demons. Viewing the rise of these evil creatures as a test from God, Saint Urbane vows to eliminate them from this realm of existence. Furthermore, he seeks to stamp out the magicians who conjure soul arts, for these dark magics are inherently evil, as they are connected to the demons and the Old One's presence. The followers of Saint Urbane proclaim the following:
A miracle is a heavenly act, but spells are the acts of demons, the work of soul arts. They have similar effects, and yet one is clearly evil, and the other is clearly good. Magicians, in the end, are mere servants of the demons.
Indoctrinated by the saint, his followers believe they are fighting for a righteous cause. Opposing Saint Urbane is Sage Frake, a powerful magician who has devoted his life to studying the soul arts. Frake has a long-standing rivalry with Saint Urbane due to his assertion that the god Urbane and his followers' worship is actually a romanticized depiction of the Old One. The saints of this world would have you believe that miracles and soul arts are polar opposites. In reality, the two are cut from the same cloth, empowered and birthed by the Old One. This is proven further by the Talisman of Beasts, a holy item carried by priests of faith. An old wooden amulet featuring a symbolic depiction of the Old One can be used to cast both miracles and magic. What was considered a depiction of God was in fact an image of the Old One, portrayed as a force of feral chaos. To this day, saints and mages continue to clash, with no end in sight. And so, the great Boletaria succumbed to the fog, at the whims of a king who judged humanity unworthy of life. Humans wander the earth, seeking souls to maintain their sanity and free will. Without souls, they are lost, husks to be commandeered by the demons.
The deep fog will eventually swallow all lands near and far. But Boletaria has one final hope. A lone warrior who has braved the baneful fog. Has the land found its savior? Or have the demons found a new slave?
Beckoned by a comforting voice, the warrior is guided to the fissure, torn open by Valifax. A goal is set before them: lull the Old One back to slumber. The adventurer is summoned to a forlorn outpost. As the warrior advances, they discover moongrass, a medicinal herb. There are several categories for this herb, each of which is named after a phase of the moon. The different lunar phases indicate the healing potency of the herb. Healing items in hand, the warrior journeys deeper. Before long, they are halted by a vanguard demon, a small taste of the many enemies yet to come. Upon its death, a fragment of an archstone appears, allowing the demon slayer to warp to another location. The warrior navigates the humid and dimly lit hallway, only to be confronted by yet another demon of colossal size. The draconic god's mere breath shakes the foundations. With mighty force, the entity crushes the would-be slayer of demons. Defeated, we are called to the Nexus, a sacred space which holds together the northern land of Boletaria, serving as a central point that connects to all other archstones across the earth. Each land is affected by world tendency. The tendency of a world depends upon the actions of those who inhabit it. Should one die in bodily form or slaughter innocent foes, the world's tendency shifts towards black. In their blackened state, new demons are birthed, and existing ones are empowered. Rumours speak of the pure blackened state of the land of the giants, suggesting this land is beyond salvation, and as such, the archstone was shattered. To this day, the Old One can be seen, impaled by gargantuan armaments. Could it be that the giants once valiantly fought the beast, only to be trampled into submission? Punished for their hubris, perhaps they were smote from existence. Whatever the case, it ended with their land being disconnected from the world, and the giants vanished from existence. Returning to world tendency, good deeds such as the slaying of demons will turn the world's inclination towards white. World tendency is intrinsically linked with our character. Commit evil acts, and our soul too is blackened. One must tread carefully, as all actions influence our perception of reality. The Nexus serves as a haven from the perils of the outside world. However, it is also a prison, not only for the Old One, but all other inhabitants. Those who dwell in the Nexus are marked by the Nexial binding. Bearers of this seal are bound to the Nexus, never to be free, even in death. Its vast halls are filled with decadent statues that evoke an air of holiness, a station of comfort for weary souls. Upon death, the soul is withdrawn from its vessel, leaving one in a spiritual form. In order to regain one's corporeal form, they must utilize an object known as the Stone of Ephemeral Eyes. This artifact resurrects the user's body. Another option is to slay demons, as this too can restore the flesh. The enigmatic Maiden in Black tends to the people of the Nexus. She is draped in black robes, and wax occludes her eyes. Just like any other, she is trapped in this sanctuary, as indicated by the Nexial binding around her ankle. There is much more to her than meets the eye, but for now, her motives remain concealed. She is not the only occupant of the Nexus. Close by, we encounter Stockpile Thomas. He reveals his traumatic past and a dire secret.
When the Scourge came, I abandoned my wife and daughter and fled like a coward. When I came to, I was in this Nexus. I haven't dared venture outside these walls since. That candle maiden cared for me during my first days here. She says very little, but has a kind heart. She's just the age my young daughter would have been.
Racked with guilt, the broken man has chosen to live within the Nexus, aiding others by storing and safeguarding their wares. It is clear he feels remorse for the family he abandoned. At a later point, he mentions,
Sometimes I stop and wonder how I ended up here. Why didn't I protect my wife and daughter, even if it meant being slain by demons? Please, forgive me. It's all in the past.
Although he made an impossible choice, he has not lost the will to live. Neither has he lost hope in us, as he leaves us with some encouraging words.
You have a heart of gold. Don't let them take it from you.
In close proximity is blacksmith Baldwin. Using souls to pay for his services, he can strengthen the arms of the Slayer of Demons. Souls are the currency of this land, not gold or silver. In addition, he mentions another smith by the name of Ed. stationed at the entrance of Stonefang Mine. Sat amidst an arrangement of candles is a worshipper of God, a devout disciple of Saint Urbain. She questions her faith, asking if God had abandoned humanity for their lack of faith in King Gallant. Perched upon the stairs, close to an archstone, a crestfallen warrior speaks out.
Well, you slipped through the fissure too, did you? You came for demon souls? Or to save this land and be remembered as a hero? Hunting for demons? Try one of the archstones. Bah, it's all the same. You're just another prisoner of the Nexus.
Clearly, the man has accepted defeat, spending the remainder of his days in the Nexus. Nonetheless, he still provided us with simple yet effective guidance. Use the Archstones to traverse the world and acquire the powerful souls of demons. With a goal set before them, the warrior musters their courage and heads towards the Archstone of the Small King. Upon interaction, they are transported to the gates of Boletarian Palace, a huge stone castle in the heart of the northern kingdom of Boletaria. Hungry soldiers attack trespassers, their souls stolen by demons, while nearby, terrible dragons have taken roost. Time has not been kind to the city, as both nature and the fog have begun to claim the kingdom, and its denizens have been reduced to dreglings, weak, zombie-like creatures. Upon their arrival, the wailing of a fearsome red dragon echoes through the skies. The dragon makes its presence known, before eagerly departing to feast on its prey. It roosts at its nest with another, a blue dragon. The two formidable creatures are a threat to adventurers and the inhabitants of Boletaria alike. Found amongst their charred victims is potentially the corpse of Valifax, a member of the Twin Fangs. Each member was granted a ring of great strength by the king himself, an item that allowed them to wield their weighty steel shields, crossbows, and hefty greatswords all at once. Such a ring can be found in the Dragon's Nest, although there is no definitive proof that Valifax is among the deceased. For some, the ring alone is enough to convince them that he met his end by dragonfire. Dragons are not the only threat in this land, but also the tainted remnants of King Gallant's forces. Additionally, a vast gate prevents the Demon Slayer from venturing further into the palace. Navigating the decrepit terrain, we come into contact with a Dregling merchant. The man has found his calling as a tradesman. Loot is aplenty, as he can pillage the corpses of fallen adventurers. He displays disdain towards the Boletarian elite, stating that the demons are not so bad in comparison, for they do not send them to die in battle, providing an interesting perspective into the treatment of the Dreglings. They were nothing but cannon fodder. In addition, he mentions the dragon encountered earlier, stating that it is one of the king's pets. Interestingly, he mentions a fellow clad in fabulous armor, perhaps a man of high rank or nobility. Surely a man of such stature would be a valuable ally in our quest to obtain demon souls. Scouring the land, we eventually discover a knight fitting the merchant's description. The man is cornered by a troop of Dreglings and calls for help. The Slayer leaps from the ramparts and kills the ambushers. Grateful, the knight offers a brass telescope, a rare trinket which employs concave glass that allows one to view distant scenes as clear as day, possibly originated in the relatively advanced region to Boletaria's south. A luxurious item that reinforces the notion this knight hails from the upper echelons of Boletarian society. For now, Ostrava returns to the Nexus. Ascending the walls of the stronghold, we discover two bodies suspended by chains, a pair who appear to have been executed. Freeing them from their bonds allows their bodies to fall to the ground below, enabling us to reach the loot on their corpses. Upon one of the corpses is a set of ragged clothes and old spice, while a jade hair ornament can be found upon the other. The Slayer pockets the items, perhaps it will come in use later. Exploring the environment, the Slayer discovers a lever. Activating the device opens the portcullis that once blocked the way. From the darkness, a spear is launched into the ground, a warning that death awaits those who enter. Standing firm, the Slayer enters through the gates. Here they are met by the Phalanx. The once lauded hero, Longbow Ulan, is but a shadow of their former self. Accompanying them is an amalgamation of twisted beings who have been moulded into slimes. Each wields a spear and a shield, making an offensive attack from the front difficult. Stacking upon each other, they form an impenetrable mound of shields and spears. One by one, the Slayer draws them out, cutting them down and melting their frames with firebombs. Eventually, the heart of the creature is revealed. The Slayer of Demons earns their title. As the creature dissipates, an outline of the soul of Ulan can be seen. From their death, the Slayer obtains a lead demon soul, a powerful source of strength. Having acquired a demon soul, the Slayer returns to the Nexus. They are welcomed by the Maiden in Black, who reveals that a monumental is stationed above. She implores us to seek them out. Following her guidance, the Slayer climbs the steps and discovers the individual. Sat alone amongst the corpses of their brethren is a single living monumental, illuminated by candlelight. The monumental speaks of the troubled history plaguing these lands, how the people had faced extinction once before, but thanks to their order, they were able to avert humanity's demise by sealing the Old One inside the Nexus. But now, the same threat looms over the world, and once again, the Old One must be lulled back to slumber before the colourless fog claims all. The monumental beseeches us to slay every demon. With the creatures vanquished, the Old One has no choice but to seek another servant, one that will feed them souls. Should the Slayer acquire every single demon soul, the Old One will invite them into his heart, with the hopes it will be fed. Utilizing this opportunity, working together with the Candle Maiden, the Old One can be soothed once more. The monumental notes that we will be imprisoned in the Nexus eternally, just like the Candle Maiden, and that lulling the Old One back to slumber is of the highest priority. Only with its rest will the flood of demons be halted. Furthermore, they state,
Have you received assistance from the Candle Maiden? She is a prisoner of the Nexus. It is her duty to lull the Old One back to its slumber. That is why she helps those who hunt demons. And that is why she has become a demon herself.
Not only does the monumental provide us with a cause to fight for, but also informs us of the purpose of the Maiden in Black and the revelation that she is a demon. It is worth mentioning, at the beginning of our journey, the voice we heard was that of the monumental.
Brave soul who fears not death, I shall guide you to the fissure, so that you may lull the Old One back to slumber.
It was their intention to guide us on this quest, hopeful that in time we would subdue the Old One. Returning to the Maiden, she elaborates that she has always been in the Nexus, existing when the Old One was awakened, and that she will be there when the beast rests once more. She reveals her ability to channel souls, allowing the Slayer of Demons to surpass mortal strength, an uncanny ability that only the Maiden can utilize due to being a demon herself. She was once one of the most powerful demons to ever exist. Why she opposes the Old One is unknown, as she was not born a demon. Perhaps she sympathizes with humanity. After all, she became a demon to inherit their powers in the hopes of aiding mankind. Her station is one of true selflessness. She tends to the flames, ensuring the candles of the Nexus remain lit, and assists all who would slay demons. A singular duty occupies her mind, and none will stray her from this path. Having conversed with the Monumental and the Maiden, the crestfallen warrior reveals the following.
Have you met the last surviving Monumental? Those fools revived the Old One on a whim. And now, they've trapped us here in the Nexus in a desperate attempt to undo their mistake. It's all a travesty, if you ask me.
A shocking revelation if true. The Monumentals were praised as the saviors of humanity, but according to the crestfallen warrior, they are the reason the world was driven to the brink in the first place. It is unknown whether this statement is true. Regardless, the only way to prevent humanity's extinction is to ally with the Monumental and bring their plans to fruition. Nearby, a familiar figure is encountered once more. Ostrava reminisces about Boletaria in its heyday. He is saddened by the rapid decline of his homeland. Interestingly, in regards to the state of Boletaria, he mutters to himself,
I refuse to believe that this is what Father wished for our great land.
Insinuating that his father is one of nobility. As his statement implies, his father made a choice that directly resulted in the decline of this once prosperous nation. With the passage of time, more adventurers arrive at the Nexus. The first of them is the acolyte and disciple of God, followers who had sworn fealty to Saint Urbain. The acolyte mentions that he had fled and abandoned the saint in his time of need. He refers to him being trapped in darkness, where no light shall ever shine, implying that the holy man had been captured in a prison of sorts. Found at the base of the Nexus is an apprentice of Sage Frake, a man whose beliefs directly conflict with that of Saint Urbain's. The apprentice begs the Slayer to free his master.
Are you here to face the demons? If so, please free Sage Frake the Visionary from his cell in Latria. Sage Frake is a gleaming hope for humankind, but I have not the power to save him alone. Master Frake is a great man who has systemized the magic of the soul arts to make it possible for human imitation. By observing the state of Boletaria and the demons within it, he is likely to pave the way for greater things.
Ironic that both Urbain and Frake have been imprisoned. At this point in time, Frake and his followers do not shy away from the use of soul arts, believing their power can be harnessed for the good of mankind. Before leaving the Nexus, the Slayer pays a visit to Stockpile Thomas.
That ornament, that belongs to my daughter. Then she didn't make it after all. My dearest little baby. May she rest in peace. May I ask a favour? Would you mind giving me that hair ornament? I'd like to have it in memory of my daughter.
Should we return the hairpin, he displays his gratitude by gifting us with a ring of Herculean strength. Thomas longs for his wife and daughter. Perhaps this hairpin will provide him with comfort in these dark times. If we are to believe that the two corpses found in Boletaria were Thomas's wife and daughter, then it is possible that his wife was a sorceress, as upon her body were the ragged clothes of a witch, as well as some old spice, an item that replenishes mana, which is utilized in spellcasting. It has even been banned in some regions due to its association with unsavory brewers, hinting the pair were executed due to the mother's practice of forbidden arts. On the other hand, the ragged robes could just be the attire of a prisoner. Once more, we venture to Boletaria, to the Lord's Path. Past the huge gates of Boletarian Palace lies what is now a feeding ground for dragons, the cliff pathway which leads to the inner ward, where knights make their abode. Yet again, Ostrava finds himself surrounded by evil warriors. Lending their sword, the Slayer assists the knight. Ostrava thanks them before returning to the Nexus. Should the Slayer follow, he will mention the legend of the two swords of the Boletarian royal family.
Here in Boletaria, we speak of the legend of the two swords and the solitary hero. The two swords are Demonbrand and Soulbrand. One sword banishes that which befouls man, and the other banishes man himself. The solitary hero is old King Doran. King Doran is the Everlasting One, founder of Boletaria and protector of the two swords. Of course, only according to legend. But in the dark state of our land, sometimes legends are all we have.
An integral piece of information that the Slayer commits to memory, for it could prove useful in the journey ahead. Moving forward, the Demon Slayer encounters a locked door. Held within is Bior of the Twin Fangs, a strong and hearty knight clad in heavy brushwood armour. His crime was his attempt to visit the king. Regrettably, he was thwarted by the black souls and dragons that protect Alant. As a consequence, he was then imprisoned by Executioner Meralda, a woman known for her lunacy and beautiful voice. In order to free him, we must obtain the Iron Key ring from the fat official nearby. Once acquired, we are able to free Bior. With his newfound freedom, Bior warps to the Nexus. As mentioned earlier, Bior is part of an elite order known as the Twin Fangs. He remains committed to the king, unlike Valifax, the second member of this faction.
Our great king was a magnanimous leader. He was stolid, spirited, caring of his subjects. He fought valiantly against the vile and depraved. The seditious claims that our Lord brought this scourge upon us, they could only be fabrications woven by jealous conspirators. That must be it. It must be. My brother-in-arms, Valifax of the Twin Fangs, was a brave and mighty knight. Unlike myself, he was the master of more than the sword. Valifax's mind was sharper than most scholars. Dark times have befallen us. If our lord, with the esteemed help of Valifax, could not prevent it, then no one could have.
Bior maintains that King Alant is not the monster others would paint him as. He refuses to believe that the king could fall to temptation and abandon his people. It is this blind faith that drives him to hunt the foul creatures that plague Boletaria. Nevertheless, he will prove a useful ally to the Slayer of Demons. He also mentions a Lone Stone Tower, stating that a sorceress is held prisoner there, another victim of Meralda. According to Bior, the captive has been subjected to all manner of untold acts in the name of purification. Unfortunately, Bior could not find a way to the tower, and so places his faith in us instead. Moreover, he unveiled a vital piece of information given to him by the Dregling merchant. Bior was informed that the son of the king, Ariona, had come to Boletaria alone. According to Bior, Ariona is a wise and kind soul, almost too kind. He would not fare well in this accursed land without protection. As a result, he states, if we should find Ariona, we are to guide him to the Nexus immediately, where Bior will take him under his wing. Curiously, Bior's description of Ariona certainly fits that of Ostrava, a son of nobility and a man who needed saving from certain death, for he is ill-prepared to deal with the blighted inhabitants of Boletaria. A life raised in the comforts of high society is unlikely to prosper on the battlefield. Of his own volition, under the name Ostrava, Ariona had returned to find his father, King Alant, and uncover the truth. Ariona hopes to exonerate, or perhaps even put an end to his father, should the need arise. He could not fathom that his father may be the sole reason that Boletaria suffers. Was the king led awry, or did he do this of his own volition? These are the questions that plague Ariona's mind. Valifax of the Twin Fangs had already claimed Boletaria suffered a blight due to the actions of its king. Ariona must learn the truth behind the rumour. Only time will tell if the young prince will reunite with his father. Traversing the ruins of Boletaria, the Slayer arrives at a stone bridge. As we attempt to cross, a familiar dragon makes an appearance, releasing a torrent of fire, incinerating all in its path. Narrowly avoiding death, the Slayer arrives at a gate of fog. Penetrating the white mist, we are met by the titanic Tower Knight. Atop the ramparts, soldiers rain down bolts and arrows. Firstly, we eliminate the men before facing the Tower Knight itself. The knight's armour is nigh on impenetrable. His vast metallic shield and thick armour proves resilient. Slamming his shield and boots into the ground, the knight is difficult to approach. Avoiding the impact, the Slayer of Demons swings their sword at its heels. With each strike, an eruption of pressure is released from the suit of armour. Eventually, the knight comes crashing down. The Slayer lifts their blade and plunges it into the head of the demon. As the Tower Knight fades from existence, we see traces of the hero he once was, Alfred, the Knight of the Tower. The way forward remains blocked. To gain access to the inner confines of the palace, we must first obtain the soul of an archdemon, a task not easily accomplished. For now, we set our gaze not to the skies, but to the roaring fires of the abyss below. For what better place for a demon to reside than in the bowels of a scorching mountain? In hopes of obtaining the next demon soul, the hero ventures beyond the borders of Boletaria to the outskirts of the Tunnel City, a city of miners who maintain the giant tunnel. Long ago, the efforts of the hard-headed burrowers allowed Boletarian soldiers to carry out their work, but now, dispossessed of their souls, they have no thoughts of their own and work in silence, tirelessly, without purpose. The lands of the Burrow King consist of giant rocky formations and winding tunnels. Labouring within the vast mountains, miners chip away at the rock, harvesting minerals that can be used in the forging of weapons and armour. Much of Boletaria's weaponry is forged using the hardened iron sourced from the tunnels of Stonefang. There is no doubt the Burrow King grew rich from the land, reaping the benefits of his people's servitude. Regardless of the wealth he had amassed, they could not transcend the fog. Much like Boletaria, the land eroded under the mist. The populace, now mindless, soul-starved husks, who continue their duty in a robotic fashion under the supervision of fat officials. Perhaps they were stationed here by Alant to ensure the Boletarian army remained steadily supplied with iron. Bearbugs, fire lizards, and rockworms infest the cracks and crevices of the mining shafts below. A barren land is all that remains. An opportunist known as the Filthy Man makes note of a treasure seeker called Scurver the Wanderer and his expedition into the unknown. Scurver had informed the Filthy Man that deep below, in the pits of the city, stands a draconic shrine. Could this be the same altar where we were neutralized earlier? In time, perhaps we will get our revenge. Found close by in a small opening below the surface is Blacksmith Ed, a forge master previously mentioned by Baldwin, a misanthropic man by nature, dedicated solely to his craft. Both Baldwin and Ed possess an armament known as the Hands of God, a fist weapon bearing God's name. There was once a strong man who slaughtered dragons with his bare hands. His godlike fists earned him the title of the legendary Big M. Iron Knuckles, a similar weapon to the Hands of God, were also adored by Stonefang's rough blacksmiths. With these weapons, they would sometimes get drunk and slug it out. At first glance, Ed appears to be apathetic to all others. Perhaps his drunken brawling days are over, or maybe he never partook in such revelry. Right now, he has no time for idle conversation, and so we part ways with the smith. Maneuvering through the twisting tunnels, the scale miners pay no heed to the slayer of demons. Their coarse skin is thick with scales, and their sunken eyes glow faintly in the dark. Chipping away at the rock is the sole thought occupying their mind, turning hostile only if one gets too close and disturbs their precious work. Found in the chasm below, an armoured spider blocks the narrow passage forward. Plated in metallic armour, the arachnid's flesh is protected. Its face and stinger are the only weaknesses in its armour. Spewing fireballs and webs, the creature keeps its distance, attempting to ensnare and devour the slayer of demons. Unwavering, the slayer charges forward, evading its webs and fire. With a swift strike, the beast is defeated. Overcoming this adversary grants the Slayer of Demons entry to the Tunnel City. Below the smithing grounds of Stonefang, the Tunnel City is a system of pathways that gave the city its name. Legend has it that deep inside, beyond the molten swamps, is a grave for dragons. Traversing the labyrinthine city, we encounter a strange man.
Wow, what jolly travelling companions are we, eh? Pleased to meet you. Call me Patches. Oh, see that treasure over there? Go on and take it. My gift to you, just to show that we're friends.
His possession of the thief ring lays bare his true intent. An ancient sapphire ring, it subdues your presence, making it difficult to be detected by enemies. Unsurprisingly, Patches is a thief, masquerading as an amicable adventurer. Should we fall for this ploy, we will be trapped by a bear bug. When confronted after, he will feign ignorance. He leaves us with a gift before moving to the Nexus. At one point in time, we come across Skirver the Wanderer.
I seek treasures of the unknown. Have you heard of the temple below? It is a work of art moulded by the ancient burrowers to appease the bones of dragons. As a precaution, a broadsword which can crush the bones of drakes is stored in the temple. Truth told, it's the laughingstock of many a swordsmith. They say it's as blunt as a bludgeon. A dull blade, meant to slay a dragon. Curious, is it not?
The treasure seeker has postponed his search for now, as he would fare poorly against the demon presence. His lust for treasure has not blinded him from this fact. At the base of a chasm, we stand before a veil of mist. Piercing the gate, the Slayer of Demons is confronted by their deadliest foe yet, the Flame Lurker, a demon of fire. An entity held prisoner in a scorched temple of stone, its dominating presence is matched by its unparalleled strength. His fists like hammers, each of its strikes akin to a volcanic eruption. Beneath the blazing heat of the beast, the Slayer of Demons becomes one with the blade, evading the demon's claws and persevering under relentless heat. The Slayer of Demons whittles the foe down before vanquishing the demon. Another falls before us, its searing soul now in our hands. Some believe that the legendary Big M, the man who beat dragons to death with his godlike fists, was warped into the Flame Lurker. After all, the demon predominantly fights with its fists and is surrounded by the bones of dragons. Sadly, there is little information supporting this theory. At long last, the Slayer of Demons stands in the fabled shrine of the dragon god. Ages ago, a fire demon was imprisoned in an underground temple, littered with the bones of dragons. Beyond the prison, in a sea of molten lava, of the resting bones of a dragon of unfathomable size. The underground shrine was constructed both to worship and imprison the dragon god. The miners' ancestors were inspired to faith by the great dragon bones and paid their respects by maintaining the shrine with great care. The temple was founded by a group of people known as the Burrowers, who were descended from the excavators of Stonefang. In their chronicles, the Burrowers unearthed the remains of many dragon bones. In awe, they constructed a temple to worship and imprison what they believed to be a dragon god. Arriving at the chamber of the Deity, the Slayer of Demons is unable to confront the god head-on. Doing so will only result in death. For this reason, the Demon Slayer avoids the gaze of the beast. Positioned on the flanks of the demon are gigantic harpoon-launching devices, a mechanism that when activated, fires a projectile with immense force. A failsafe existing solely to bring the draconic deity into submission. Unlike many followers of faith, the worshippers had the foresight to install these machines, should their omnipotent deity turn upon them. Using this, we are able to incapacitate the demon, leaving it vulnerable. Unable to defend itself, the dragon god can only watch as the Slayer of Demons drives their blade into its skull. The ravenous beast lies silent, its rage quelled at last. Curiously, unique spells and miracles exist, both originating from the bones and demonic soul of the dragon god. Fireball and Firestorm evoke the infernal and uncontrollable chaotic powers of the dragon, whereas God's Wrath, a miracle, represents the power of God against tremendous malice. It is one of the greatest miracles, aiding all who are righteous. Strangely, one of the most powerful miracles to exist is derived from the soul of a demon, affirming the notion that magic spells and miracles are one and the same. In the vicinity, we discover the fabled Dragon Bone Smasher, a weapon coveted by many, a bladeless, thick mass of iron used for smashing. According to the ancestors of Stonefang's excavators, it's said this weapon was created to face dragons and is imbued with magic to protect the wielder from fire. It can be shown to Scurver, for which he is grateful. He beseeches the Slayer of Demons to take care of the storied blade. At last, we return to Boletaria to penetrate the inner ward of the palace. Inside Boletaria's gates, where the streets intertwine, lie traps set by the much reviled fat officials, themselves living proof of old King Alant's madness. Navigating the cobbled alleyways of the ward, the Slayer of Demons hears an all too familiar voice. Once again, Ostrava calls for aid. Saved from certain doom, Ostrava thanks the Slayer. Clearly, the knight is out of his depth. Every inch he moves forward is a mighty struggle. Ostrava is all too aware of the countless times he has been saved. Helplessness stifles his courage, but this does not dissuade him from achieving his goal.
You saved my life. This is the third time. I am truly indebted to you. Now I must go. My father, the king, awaits me.
Recalling the prisoner mentioned by Bior, the Demon Slayer ventures to the stone tower. Met by a fat official, the Slayer is unable to enter. To bypass the warden, we disguise ourselves by equipping the attire of an official. Before speaking with the woman, the Slayer of Demons deals with the jailer. Upon close inspection, we can see that the prisoner is draped in the ragged robes of a witch, identical to the garments found on the corpse of Thomas's wife. At first, she mistakes us for one of the officials. After realizing she has been freed, she chooses to rest and recuperate her strength before making the journey to the Nexus. Inside the room in which she was held is a ring of magical nature. Legend says that cursed witches are born holding it. The natives of savage lands avoid it at all costs. Residents of Boletaria viewed her as a heretical witch who needed to be cleansed, leading to her imprisonment. In truth, this cleansing was simply torture, conducted by the fat officials. Alas, the Slayer of Demons has no choice but to forge ahead. After felling countless knights and soldiers, we are met by a fog gate. Crossing the veil, a lone fat official taunts us. Before he can make his first move, a straight sword is thrust through his torso. In a single strike, the man is no more. Marching through the fog appears the Penetrator, a demon who was once met as Knight of the Lance. This tall and lean knight delivers precise and deadly thrusts. Unyielding, the Slayer of Demons prepares for the fight ahead. That is until they hear the voice of Bior. The Knight of the Twin Fangs will repay our kindness by lending his strength in the battle ahead. Together, the Demon Slayer and Bior crush the Penetrator, banishing the entity once and for all. Akin to the Phalanx and Tower Knight demons, for a brief moment, the spirit of Metas can be seen. Seeking respite, the Slayer of Demons returns to the Nexus. Bior shares his thoughts.
Do you intend to challenge the king? You may be a great demon hunter, but I fear you may not be ready. The king's defended by the black souls of mighty knights and a fire-breathing drake. They defeated even myself. That's how I ended up in the dungeon. Beware the limits of your own power.
Although Bior fights in the name of his king, he is aware of our intent. Ultimately, the cycle can only end with the king. The Knight of the Twin Fangs fights for his monarch. Perhaps this is Bior's way of honouring the king he once knew. In an isolated corner of the Nexus, Yuria has made herself a new home.
Hello again. You saved me from great agony. I am sorry, for I cannot offer proper thanks. But should you have demon souls, I can teach you magic. Only my witchcraft is of a dark nature, and arouses suspicions. Once, I lusted after demon souls. I passed the fissure into Boletaria, but became trapped by the Nexus. Then, the king's executioner, Meralda, chained me up inside that tower. My thirst for demon souls is no more. On the contrary, I find such power dangerous.
Uriah no longer covets the souls of demons, and even dissuades us from learning her dark magic, due to the pain it brought her. Ironic, considering her magic is closely related to miracles, an inconvenient truth for the Church. Nonetheless, the practice of magic of any kind is forbidden. Perched upon a narrow bridge, Ostrava speaks to the Slayer. Despite the incoming hordes of demons and the boundless fog, he holds fast to hope. A far cry from what his father felt before plunging humanity into ruin. Together, Ostrava, the slayer of demons, and all who accompany them are beacons of hope in these dark times.
King Alant led Boletaria with a round table of the bravest knights. But today Boletaria is an abysmal mess. Valifax was lost, and Bjor slipped through the fissure, never to be heard from again. All the rest, along with Boletaria, are either devoured by the fog or fallen afoul of the demons. The Boletarian knights are no longer, but perhaps our age will see the rise of new heroes, such as yourself.
The Slayer of Demons approaches the Archstone of the Tower Queen, a mirror to the world of Latria, the land of the Queen's Ivory Tower. Engraved in stone, the following words paint a picture. A vengeful old man claimed the Queen's life and imprisoned any remaining royalty. The prison echoes with the resentful cries of its inmates, tormented by their inhuman guards. Latria was once home to a benevolent queen. She ruled alongside her husband, and through consistent effort, developed the kingdom of Latria to be one that commanded respect. The denizens of Latria had great adoration for their queen, recognizing that she placed their needs above her own. In time, Latria even became home to nobles. The land encompasses an infamous penitentiary, a church, and of course the Great Ivory Tower itself. At the peak of a civilization's rise, evil finds its way through the cracks. It is through the acquisition of power that one's character is present in its most authentic form and put to the test, a test that the king unfortunately failed. His greed grew along with his pockets. The more he obtained, the more he desired. The old man's nature to yearn for power that was not his would become not only his downfall, but the collapse of Latria. The greed of man is a cautionary tale as old as time, a catalyst to a downward trajectory with no redemption. Recognizing that her husband's intentions were no longer aligned with her own,
the Queen banished that depraved old man from the land.
During the king's exile, the Old One was awakened, and with that came the second scourge of demons. The stars aligned for the vengeful old man, who was granted power through a magical entity in the form of a golden garb. Unbeknownst to him, the garb would not be an ally, but a force for evil which seeks a vessel to subjugate, latching onto any old fool desperate enough to allow it. The old man was nothing more than a medium for the robe that drives men mad. The lust for power and revenge led to the old man adorning the golden garb, and in turn losing his mind, becoming a mere vessel to an entity of darkness, an archdemon to the Old One. If you have no future to lose, then who could blame you for placing your faith in the golden robes? Such is the mark of desperation. As the story is told,
he returned in strange golden garb with foul demons in tow. They pillaged great Latria, land of the learned, and shut us away in this prison.
Unforeseen, the deposed king returned as the old monk, leading an army of demons. He took the queen's life and imprisoned the denizens of Latria. The wrath of the vengeful king resulted in the kingdom of Latria becoming a place of torture and death. A key structure within Latria is the Prison of Hope. One may assume the name to be nothing more than an ironic moniker for a dungeon that inspires all but hope. But the origin of its name is far more sinister. A prisoner known as a former noble's wife, also referred to as the once royal mistress or the singing lady, sheds light on the truth of the prison and the purpose it serves. At first, the denizens were locked away, but
since then, they've been feeding off our souls, telling us over and over that if we go above, we will be granted redemption.
Those imprisoned are under the impression that their queen still lives and resides in the Church of Latria. The old monk promised redemption to all on the basis they achieve one singular goal: to ascend the dungeon and meet their queen's embrace. The helpless captives held fast to hope, fighting tooth and nail to reach their beloved queen and be rescued from the depths of their despair. However, upon reaching the church, they were met with the realization that their queen is no more. In her place was the fool's idol. The idol was in the form of the queen of now lost Latria. The church devoted to an idol that mimicked the queen gave the prisoners a ray of hope, but no doubt a deep malice awaited them, poised to mercilessly dash what faint dreams they had. Manipulated by the fool's idol, prisoners were lulled by a false projection of their queen and snatched by gargoyles, who carried them atop the ivory tower. In the ivory tower, prisoners hung in cages, their flesh patched together to create fleshy monstrosities. It was the doing of Latria's new master, an old man who had long ceased to be human, seeking to create demons by his own hand. Countless corpses were discarded in an endless sea of blood. Tentacles absorbed the remains of those sacrificed and fed them to an entity resembling an artificial womb at the core of the tower. The end result sees the prisoners emerge as horrific abominations, contorted into spider-like creatures, their faces still humanoid and their agony ever present in their expression. This is the redemption promised to the prisoners of Latria, a skin-crawling revelation that the mission bestowed by the vengeful old monk was not for salvation, but to see the people of his former queen suffer eternally. There is no worse suffering than one embedded in hope, a fictitious idea that the suffering can and will come to an end. Stepping foot in Latria, potent are the cries of those in captivity, echoing through the desolate narrow walls and reverberating across the steel bars of its infinitely present cells. The prisoners encountered appear starved and docile, imposing little threat. Chunks of melted poisonous ores are rationed to prisoners in Latria in minuscule quantities. Mercury stone chunks are commonly used to reinforce weapons, potentially hinting at manual labour being forced upon prisoners. Alternatively, the ores may have been used to poison the already frail captives as a form of punishment. Moving forward, we are halted by a myriad of prison guards. They are octopus-headed mages who wield powerful magic. This wasn't always the case, however. Observing their robes, it is possible that these creatures were once human. In fact, likely ones from a line of nobility. Out of spite, the Elder chose aristocrats to be his servants. If those most righteous could be stripped completely of their humanity and turned into demon slaves, then what hope did anyone else have? Here in the prison, we come in contact with Frake the Visionary, the sorcerer originating from the distinguished Jormungandr school. He is adorned in a plain travelling suit, which makes long marches possible. However, it is the travel wear of a dirty sage. This shows Sage Frake's origins quite well. Interestingly, his robes are similar to that of a saint's robe, hinting at a likelihood that he was once a man of faith. Frake is found clasping a baby's nail in hand, a dagger often used by women and children for assassination. The sage was potentially on a mission to assassinate the tyrannical elder who seized Latria, but his journey was cut short when he was captured and imprisoned in a cell. Remarkably, much of Frake's equipment is crafted by Gary, a man known for his handiworks, said to be a close acquaintance of Frake. Through the use of Prison of Hope keys, Frake can be set free, allowing him to relocate to the Nexus. He was just one of many unfortunate souls who reside in the dark claustrophobic confines of the prison.
My name is Rydell. Please, liberate me from this jail. I have precious little time. I must retrieve an article from my corpse. As you can see, the only thing that remains of me is my soul. My corpse lies in another cell. I fancy it a fine, rotten mess by now. I've no interest in my corporeal flesh, but I left upon my person a keepsake of my late wife. I will soon fade into the beyond. My only wish is to do so near that token of my beloved.
Lord Rydell watches as his body decomposes just beyond his reach. He seeks not his corporeal form, but a token left behind by his late wife. Rydell is often referred to as Little Alant, meaning that he may potentially be a relative to King Alant, a younger sibling perhaps, but he himself would neither deny nor confirm such claims. Acquiring a particular set of keys, Lord Rydell can be freed from confinement. With the little time he has left, he pursues his own corpse in hopes that he'll pass away beside the token of his beloved. Interestingly, maneuvering through the prison, we come in contact with Lord Rydell's body. On it is a broken phosphorescent pole, revealing that one of Lord Rydell's most storied exploits is his theft of this weapon from the Witch in the Sky. Some have theorized the Witch in the Sky to be a reference to the Maiden in Black, due to the likeness of the pole she wields, but the true identity of the mystery person may never be revealed. Marching ahead, the Slayer of Demons sets their gaze to the Church of Latria to put an end to the Fool's Idol and the sinister plotting of the old monk. As established, the idol is an artificial doll, crafted in the Queen's image. It has the capacity to clone itself, paralyze its opposition, and cast magic in the form of deadly projectiles. The idol's expertise in sorcery is a reflection of the Queen herself, and the abilities she harbored. It is soon realized that the battle is futile, as in defeating the idol, it will once again rise from the ashes. It is a doll after all. The culprit behind its revival is a prisoner located on the balcony of the church. He casts a magical seal on the floor, akin to the one conjured by the idol. It is as if the idol is a marionette without strings. When confronted, the prisoner denies his contribution to the idol's resurgence, but the proof is evident before our eyes. None but one person knows of the facade created by the liar.
I know the truth. The church goddess may die, but never for long.
The former noble's mistress is wise to the old monk's cunning, inviting some theories to suggest that her former husband may very well be the liar, now a slave to the old monk. Putting an end to the prisoner, we pave the way to defeating the idol. No more resurrections, no more lies. In taking down this adversary, we are rewarded with the soul of the Fool's Idol demon. Ensuing the battle, 3 gargoyle demons take hold of the Slayer, delivering them above the church to Upper Latria. Before progressing, we trace our steps back to the Nexus to recuperate. Here stands Sage Frake and his apprentice. As established, the awakening of the Old One revitalized magic within the kingdom of Boletaria, also giving rise to faith in that which is divine. Frake's belief opposes the grain, however, and he does not shy away from making that heard.
Prayer is for the foolish, quaint, and soon-to-be dead. And heaven forbid the day you find out what their so-called God really is.
The god he believes to be the Old One. Through conversing, Frake's desire to obtain demons' souls becomes ever more apparent, promising the demon slayer that if they choose to present him with souls, they will be rewarded with knowledge of the dark arts. Studying the tale of the Golden Elder of Latria, Frake states that we were wrong to assume that only demons could do demon work, as humans have proven to be capable of evolving to a higher state. His fascination with demons and dark magic is a cause for concern. The role he plays is reminiscent of the Ravenous Ones within Norse mythology. The names Frake and his close acquaintance Geri are a reference to Odin's wolves Freki and Geri. Following a war, the hounds would flood the battlefield, feasting on the corpses of the fallen. Parallel to this, Frake awaits the Slayer to defeat each of the archdemons, and once the deed is done, ravages their souls, utilizing them for his own gain. For now, we center our attention to Upper Latria, as the old monk cannot be left to his own accord. Pivoting to the details of the environment, red flags and pieces of cloth can be found attached to various objects. In the original Demon Souls, the cloth was coloured yellow, resembling the old monk's robe, a signifier of his takeover of Latria. Maneuvering through the land, we are ambushed by stone gargoyles. Some are seen wielding a spiral rapier, which is meant to inflict pain and cause bleeding, rather than deal damage, which provides a glimpse into the insanity of the old monk. Other gargoyles opt to keep their distance and fire a crossbow at trespassers. In the close distance, we hear a faint voice seeking aid.
Are you here to fight the demons? If so, then help me escape this place. I am on your side. I have come to face the demons.
Held within an elevator cell is Yurt, the Silent Chief. He dons an armor set, which has an extremely high level of adhesion. The black iron robs the wearer of his or her body heat, causing them to shiver and breathe out cold air. His armor being stitched together hints at wear and tear, possibly from fighting demons, or perhaps looting it from a corpse he killed. Little is known yet, but the fact he claims to be an ally, but disappears from Latria following his release, leaves little room for hope. Continuing ahead, we encounter twin demons known as man-eaters. Visually they resemble legendary animals from Persian mythology, named manticores. A manticore possesses the head of a man, the body of a lion, and the tail of a dragon or scorpion. Similarly, man-eaters are also a mold of various creatures. They have a humanoid head, the body of a lion, bat wings, and a serpentine tail. Intriguingly, the serpent affixed to a man-eater's back appears to act independently from the rest of the body. Could it be that they are two entities stitched into one? A weapon derived from the soul of a man-eater is described as such. It stabs its target, hooks into the flesh, and slowly grinds away at the soul. Could it symbolize the relationship between the host and the snake within the man-eater? This informs that the tie-in between a man-eater and a serpent is formed through abnormal means, revealing that man-eaters are likely products of experimentation, the sum of the many attempts made by the old monk to transform the people of Latria into demons. During the battle, it is clear that the man-eaters are tormented by the serpent, their blinding green eyes indicative of the snake's poison, perpetually inflicting from within. The two are in conflict, as the serpent is often seen digging its fangs in the back of its host, causing the man-eater to writhe in pain. Dismembering the tail alleviates the creature from its inner turmoil, but its salvation is short-lived, as the Slayer lays the twin demons to rest. Within the same room, at the end of the hallway lies a corpse which uniquely possesses two souls. This brings rise to the theory that the twin demons were created using the soul of a conjoined twin. The body found is likely one of numerous who were used for the abominable experiment. Scaling the ivory tower, the Slayer of Demons arrives at the throne room of Jormungandr. At the pinnacle of an unrelenting ascent through Latria, we finally lock eyes with the man responsible for the chaos imposed upon this once thriving kingdom. The old monk's body appears hollow and dry, a shriveled husk of a man. His revenge complete, the old man withered away, driven to madness by the golden robes that controlled his body. Now too frail to serve as a vessel, he was fully absorbed by the demon's soul. No longer of use, the old man was abandoned by the robe. Stripped of the one entity believed to be his source of strength, the old man took his final breath before entering eternal sleep. Within moments, the demonic robe latches onto a new prey, one fresh and full of life. Without hesitation, the demon slayer takes the life of the new vessel, and with it, the golden robes are no more. In the end, the elder was a man like any other, one driven by revenge and consumed by greed. His dictatorial ambitions were the very reason he was banished from Latria and eventually consumed by a demon. This isn't a tale of a stoic conqueror or a man who commanded respect through strength, but one of a pitiful being, too weak to control his own lust. It is easy to dehumanize those who commit evil, ascribing their actions to be demonic or monstrous. This exempts us from looking within ourselves and accepting that we humans are capable of such atrocities. The truth is, the old man was a demon long before the arrival of the Golden Garb. To be human is to understand that we are innately flawed, capable of greed, tyranny, and even revenge. Despite this, the silver lining lies in the fact that we are also capable of the complete opposite, the pinnacle of good. If what is all-powerful cannot be all good, does that imply that power is the root of all evil, or does human nature remain our bane? The Ivory Queen lived to serve her people, and for that she was loved by her people, proving that power isn't always corruptible. Maybe, just maybe, power is made to enhance one's true nature, a heightened reflection of what lies within our soul. With another archdemon conquered, we mark our return to the Nexus. Wandering the hub is Yurt the Silent Chief, who was rescued earlier from Upper Latria. Suspiciously, since his arrival, corpses have begun to appear within the Nexus.
Yurt's a mercenary. He'd kill his own kin for the right price. Now, I'm not a saint, but compared to Yurt, I'm as saintly as they come. So, I implore you to stay away from Yurt, the assassin in black.
In truth, Yurt is no ally. He's a self-serving mercenary, working under a woman named Mephistopheles. His mission is to murder anyone in Bulutaria who has learned the ways of soul arts. If left without intervention, the bloodthirsty mercenary will not rest until his goal is accomplished. As mentioned, the hooded figure orchestrating the assassinations is Mephistopheles, a high-ranking member of a masked society who meet in secret to discuss the harnessing of souls. Their objective is to dispatch all who are knowledgeable in soul arts, in order to ensure the ancient rite is kept a secret. If we put an end to Yurt, Mephistopheles will attempt to employ us amongst her ranks, presenting 6 contracts, each naming a target to be assassinated. With every contract fulfilled, the Slayer of Demons is rewarded with weapons and items of value. This, however, is at the cost of blackening their soul. The character Mephistopheles is inspired by one of the same name in a German folktale. The name itself roughly translates to not loving light, which is fitting as Mephistopheles darkens our soul through inciting murder. In the folktale, an author named Faust makes a deal with Mephistopheles, who is representative of a demon, in exchange for knowledge and otherworldly pleasures. As a consequence, the author's soul is corrupted and pulled to the depths of hell. In the same manner, if we execute the requests of Mephistopheles, our soul is drowned in darkness. Unswayed by the evil that beckons, we refuse to aid in the murder of countless innocents, and instead lay to rest the hooded woman. Continuing our journey, we step foot in a new realm, one belonging to the shaman of the Tempest-worshipping Shadowmen, the island shrine of the Shadowmen, who worshipped storms and mourned the dead. Since the appearance of the flying storm beasts, the souls of the dead have been lured to the island by its demons, where they are revived by finding purchase in the bosoms of uninhabited skeletons. In a time long past, the Shadowmen, an ancient tribe of barbarians, built the Shrine of Storms on a desolate island. Through ritualistic practices, they would appease the storm beasts and their leader, the Storm King, in addition to expunging the malice of their deeds. The ceremony is carried out as such. Shadowmen who die would be brought to the Adjudicator, the judge who determines if one is worthy of being carried to the shrine. Cowardly acts and the eating of birds must not be the deeds of a hero of storms. If the one being judged displeases the Adjudicator's master, the Golden Crow, the deceased soul will be gnawed upon until nothing but their bones remain. The Golden Crow perched upon the Adjudicator's head is the true judge, punishing those who have sinned, and providing respite for those who have not. The Adjudicator Demon is the executioner, delivering justice using a meat cleaver, a weapon that transforms sinners into delicious-looking cuts of meat. For those who are free of sin, the Adjudicator bestows tokens of heroism upon the deserving dead, who are delivered by Shadowmen to the depths of the Shrine of Storms, where they are cleansed by bright water and mourned by the storms. During the final phase, the hero's remains are offered to the Storm King, a beacon for countless storm beasts whose broad wings blacken the sky. Upon arriving in this ancient land, it is evident that although the shrine still stands, the tribe has long withered and passed. Left behind are undead skeletons, storm beasts, and even a vanguard demon. The skeletons were given life by the storm beasts, who collected souls and inserted them into the remains of heroic spirits who performed impressive feats in life and died in battle. Evidently, the Shadowmen did not fear death, but welcomed it, as only through death would they be offered to the shrine, a ceremony they were honoured to partake in. From a distance, the Slayer is called upon.
I am Satsuki. I seek a keepsake of my father. Have you seen the sword inscribed Makoto?
Satsuki explains that the Makoto is no sword for the faint of heart. It chooses its owner, but he who harbours self-delusions should be warned. Upon returning the weapon to whom we believe to be its rightful owner, Satsuki's demeanour shifts.
This luster, it's finally mine. But could this sword really be as deadly as they say? There is only one way to find out.
In an instant, Satsuki turns his blade to the Slayer. Digging deeper into the origin of the blade, the betrayal begins to make sense. A cursed katana that has appeared in folklore through the ages, named for Makoto the giant, who lived in a distant land. Cursed weapons like the Makoto are said to devour the wielder's essence and rob their warmth. Innumerable warriors continue to be taken by the Makoto's allure nonetheless. It is safe to assume that the blade was no family heirloom, but a weapon desired for its supernatural qualities. Whether the wanderer intended ill will from the beginning, or was wholly transformed upon clasping the cursed sword, remains unknown. Regardless, the Slayer of Demons is made to take his life. Ahead, we encounter grave robber Blige, a scavenger searching the abandoned island for left behind treasure. The grave robber appears to have fallen into one of many traps set out by Patches the hyena. Using a copper key, Blige can be freed from captivity.
You saved me. Heavens, I can't believe I fell for that trap. This shrine was used in a ghastly ritual by an ancient tribe. They have long perished, and now the demons have put the souls to work.
Blige believes his actions to be moral, explaining that on this island, he kills only those who are already dead, opposed to sapping the life out of soul-starved humans. Continuing forward, the Slayer of Demons stands opposing the Adjudicator. The sheer size of this demon indicates the number of unworthy sinners it had devoured throughout time. The adversary possesses an extremely long tongue, used to attack those who stand beyond reach of its sharp cleavers. The claustrophobic arena makes for a difficult battle, as with such little space for evading, victory rests upon a game of inches. Interestingly, the demon can be defeated through attacking the golden crow on its head, indicating that the bird is its source of life. The demon is weakened through a multitude of strikes, aimed precisely at a gaping wound in its torso, causing the creature to collapse. Seizing the opportunity, the demon slayer cuts down the golden crow. Emerging victorious, we enter the ritual path. The dark catacombs are home to reapers cloaked in robes and wielding harvest scythes. They summon apparitions in the form of shadow lurkers to protect the sacred grounds from grave robbers. The shadowy figures granted life appear humanoid with elongated features. Perhaps they were once shadowmen. In the dungeon, we again cross paths with Patches the hyena, cowering in fear of the dangers that inhabit these lands. Even so, trinkets remain the focal point of his existence.
That pit there is filled with treasure, but I'm having a little trouble getting to it myself. Go on, take a look. There are more riches than you could dream of.
Giving him the benefit of the doubt, we step closer to the edge, only to be betrayed once again. Falling to the bedrock of the catacombs, we discover that we weren't the first to have fallen for this windless deception. Corpses litter the ground from end to end, all poor souls who were hurled to their death. If the fall wasn't fatal, starvation surely did the job. To our fortune, we encounter another survivor. Saint Urbain is a pilgrim of God, a man embellished by faith, believing wholly that prayer and worship will rid Boletaria of the demonic scourge. The saint's white robes indicate his high-ranking status as a priest. As a man of faith, it is peculiar to witness a saint being lured to the pit by the promise of treasure. On the other hand, he may have sought it for a selfless cause, to fund the church's campaign against the demons. Urbain claims that dark, fearsome souls stand between us and freedom, referring to a black phantom wielding a hiltless blade. A fine piece of work with an intricate design forged by a famous swordsmith in a distant land. Extremely difficult to handle, owing to the fact that it must be held by the blade, inevitably injuring the wielder. Defeating the phantom, a pathway out of the bleak cavernous pit presents itself. With our help, Saint Urbain relocates to the Nexus, where he, along with his disciple, cleansed the demon souls we provide and turned them into miracles. Shifting back to the cavern, on the other side of freedom we find Patches.
You? Hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Well, a man's got to make a living, right?
Forgiveness is a virtue, but what if kindness is continually taken for granted? Despite Patches' effort to guide us to our grave, we decide to live and let live. A wise man once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Advancing, we are halted by the presence of a towering warrior of legend, the Old Hero, known through time as the Searcher of Storms. His name reveals that long ago, the ancient tribe had designated this brave soldier to seek out the Storm King's domain. A task of this magnitude would coincide with endless years of battle, now showcased through his bodily scars. The state of his sword also legitimizes his status as a warrior. The rickety blade has become severely weathered due to years of fighting. With every conflict, one tempts fate. Toil with fate enough times, and like a pendulum, it'll swing back without hesitation. Inevitably, the Old Hero's final day would see him meet the wrong end of a blade. It is suggested that following his death, the Old One granted him life anew, for his heroism was an amalgamation of all the ideals formed by the Shadowman, a true warrior if there ever was one. Reawakened, the Old Hero would return as a demon. Although blind, the demon's heightened senses allow it to pick out its target from the slightest motion or the faintest of sound. Using stealth-based tactics, the Demon Slayer chips away at the Old Hero, delivering death by 1,000 cuts. At the Altar of Storms, one final entity awaits, the Storm King. Perhaps this demon, a flying beast resembling a gigantic stingray, is a manifestation of the thoughts and feelings of the Shadowmen who worshipped it centuries ago. The divine beast hovers high above the clouds, illuminated only by the strikes of lightning, consuming the sky. Alongside it, countless storm beasts swarm the horizon. The downpour of rain attacks the ground with intent, allowing for very little visibility. Etched into the cliffs, a message warns: to challenge the storm, you will need a sword to rend the sky. Evading the unrelenting projectiles of the king, the Slayer of Demons clasps a sword wedged in stone, calling upon the might of every brave soul who's walked this path. A storm ruler is pulled from the earth, a legendary large sword with a barbed blade, named for one who quells or controls storms. It is said that the ancestral Shadowman rent the very storm clouds from the sky with its might. Abandoned for an age, the sword is badly deteriorated, but what remains of this once mighty weapon is still enough to send foes flying. If wielded in the Forest of Monoliths, resting place of ancestral spirits, its power to rend the sky might just be reawoken. Surrendering their faith to the storm, the Slayer of Demons smites down the beast, each swing unleashing a concentrated strike of wind, piercing the Storm King's flesh. Unable to endure the blows inflicted, the Storm King plummets from the sky. The deity of this land was naught more than a demon, one that emerged following the Old One's awakening. Acknowledging the historic nature of the tribe and the ancient rituals they performed, the Storm King is potentially a product of the first Scourge. Whilst now, demons are unanimously regarded as a force for evil, centuries ago, their appearance was a new phenomenon, and understandably, they were viewed as gods. As with all religions, the Shadowmen placed their fates in the hands of what they believed to be a higher power. They lived to serve the demons and died with optimism, convinced that their afterlife would be a reflection of their mortal existence. Whether good or bad was down to the morality and actions of the individual. The Adjudicator Demon, along with the Golden Crow, are representative of a judge and executioner. The Old Hero is the archetypal ideal that one would strive towards, the prophet who demonstrates the feasibility of the path most desirable. The Storm King was the higher power, which couldn't be entirely understood, but would be worshipped nonetheless. After all, that is the role of an all-powerful cosmic being. Truthfully, the Shadowmen lived a false existence, appeasing a false deity. In spite of that, their faith propelled them to strive for a meaningful life, the life of a warrior, one of courage and bravery. With that said, one may ponder what's more important, the validity of a belief system or the moral and ethical teachings elicited by it. In a world of disorder and chaos, the depth of depravity ceases to surprise. Yet one could not have envisioned the existence of a dumping ground for those who are wretched, neglected, and abused. The land of decay, known as the Valley of Defilement, is a cornerstone for the most unholy of individuals. Unfortunate souls would be drafted to the valley to pay for their sins, but there was no redemption here. Those who enter do not see the light of day again. It all begins in the depraved chasm. This humid valley is a haven for the used and forgotten. Its inhabitants, afflicted by poison and plague, await their deaths in this forsaken place, attacking those who wander in, hoping to offer their souls to the one woman who showed them compassion. The woman in question is Maiden Astraea, who was once the sixth saint, but now she lives beside those awaiting death in the Valley of Defilement. To ease the pain of the valley's dwellers, Astraea chose surrender to a demon's soul over the cruel god she worshipped. Maiden Astraea was raised in nobility. Her upbringing was one of perfection, a pure soul and follower of God. Having heard of the Valley of Defilement and the abhorrent conditions that its residents endure, the maiden vowed to travel to the chasm in hopes of relieving their suffering. Upon arriving, Astraea, along with her companion Karl Vinland, laid eyes on horrors they could not have imagined. The helplessness of those who were abandoned, withered, and disease-ridden weighed heavily on the maiden's soul. Through years of working in service of its inhabitants, her faith in God began to waver. An incessant thought plagued her mind: what God would allow such merciless suffering to exist? And with that, her belief vanished with the wind. Prayer was no longer sufficient. Astraea believed that she must take action herself, to dirty her hands and heal the pain of the residents of the valley. In doing so, the once pure saint would corrupt herself, allowing demonhood to possess her. Becoming an archdemon, Astraea would rule over the valley, along with her still human companion Karl. Although human no more, the maiden maintained her qualities of compassion and kindness, and as a result garnered favour with the valley's residents, amassing a cult following who would collect souls and present them to her in exchange for salvation. Just as she served them, the residents would come to serve her. Although Astraea is the most impure demon of all, her works are equal to those of divine beings. As true as that may be, her intention to be a force for good would reap questionable results. As mentioned, to perform miracles of relief, Astraea required souls, as a demon expectedly does. In desperation, the residents of the valley turned hostile, killing newcomers in order to acquire their souls, and in times of need presenting their own soul to the maiden. In consequence, the soulless residents would lose the ability to think or feel effectively, essentially becoming lobotomized. This paradoxical behaviour only worsened the state of the valley. A mission that began as a means of helping the poor inhabitants would result in said inhabitants murdering each other and losing their humanity.
Ever since that demoness came here, everything has turned foul. Those ridiculous white robes of hers, I swear I caught her glaring at my son in disgust.
The words of the local paint a clear image of what has become of the valley. A place where a mother fears for her child's life, for it may be taken by the crazed followers of the maiden. Stepping foot in this land, we see for ourselves that the state of the valley is no better than it was prior to the maiden's arrival. Depraved ones make up the bulk of the population, once humans who were discarded. Having lived in putrid disease and decay, they appear pained and horrifically disfigured. Grotesque vermin litter the ground beneath our feet, infected rats that likely carry and spread disease, not to mention giant ticks, who luxuriate on the blood of the dead, which explains their bloated nature. Traversing deeper into the dark pits of the chasm, the slayer of demons encounters a leechmonger, a horde of blood-sucking leeches merged together into one colossal writhing demon. To reach this foe, one must maneuver through a series of narrow wooden planks, a spiraling descent towards a river of waste. all whilst evading countless chunks of leeches being hurled from below. Once the distance is closed, the leechmonger stands little chance in the way of victory, and is swiftly defeated. Although not a demanding obstacle, the leechmonger personifies all that is depraved and wretched, an amalgamation of the poison and disease that has accumulated through the years. Ahead lies the Swamp of Sorrows. All that is unclean ends up in the giant swamp at the base of the Valley of Defilement. The swamp is a cesspool of putrilage, vermin and plague.
Why? You are one of the sane ones, are you not? I am Selen of the West. I seek my brother Garl Vinland, the knight who accompanied Saint Estraya on her travels. I believe they settled here. If you happen to see my younger brother, please tell me. I must share with him the last words of our father.
In purpose of finding and delivering the final words of her late father, Selen travels through the valley alone. Her only defense, a curved sword with a perfectly transparent blade. Selen Vinland, the dull gold knight, was famously dauntless, and this sword was equally well known as a Vinland family treasure. Although we remain clueless of the location of Garl and the maiden Estraya, we promise to aid Selen in finding her younger brother. Continuing forward, we face the Dirty Colossus, a deformed creature formed of the compiled dregs of the valley. Akin to the leechmonger, this demon is a showcase of the filth which circulates this land. Like those who came before, the demon is slain. Deeper still is the rotting haven. Beyond the swamp, filled with poisonous jellyfish and giant slugs, is a cavern that absorbs all that is unclean, and a shrine of rotten trees erected in honor of a demon. Visitors offer souls to be freed from their notions of suffering. Within the Sanctuary of the Lost, we bear witness to Maiden Estraya and Garl Vinland. Dozens of animated baby corpses infest the swamp surrounding them, sacrificial bodies used to fuel the soul of Demon Estraya. In addition, dead soldiers surround their feet, all drowned in a river of blood. The deceased knights are adorned in armor given to knights who protect sacred temples. Myrd, now long lost, is the name of the area where the first temples were built. The sacred temples of Myrd are said to be churches of worship, built for those devout to God, the same faith from which Estraya originally hailed. In response to her betrayal, legions of soldiers were likely dispatched to locate and kill Estraya, only to find themselves outnumbered by masses of her deranged followers.
Vito the Moonlight Knight, Rizaya of Istarel, even Selen Vinland. Many honorable knights have ventured into Boletaria in search of the Valley of Defilement. The vicious rumors about Estraya offend our most basic sense of respect for God's name. However, none of these great knights have made it back.
Estraya, who willingly accepted the corrupted and corroded, naturally became the most corrupted of them all. She's found staring into the depths of a soul she clasps. Her white robes are partially submerged in a pool of blood, symbolizing her slow descent into demonhood. Although she had undertaken an altruistic endeavor, it is clear that Estraya had lost touch of reality. In our presence, the maiden's loyal guard and companion is forced to pick up arms. The two have walked this path hand in hand from the very beginning. Garl's loyalty blinds him from the objective truth of the hypocrisy of Estraya's existence. Although human, he remains by her side, opposing anyone who wishes to disturb her healing. If the knight is defeated in battle, the maiden will surrender her own life, knowing that she alone cannot oppose the slayer of demons. A bitter end for a selfless saint, who ventured into darkness with little regard of the consequences that will transpire. And not to forget, Garl Vinland, a trustworthy knight whose loyalty would see him live and die by the side of a woman who gave up her humanity for the betterment of others. Upon Garl's death, an item of great importance can be obtained from his body, a small, intricately decorated Vinland family crest.
That crest? A Vinland heirloom meant for my younger brother. The poor souls. Perhaps their hearts were too pure.
The sorrow of losing a loved one is not to be understated, but the one comforting prospect lies in knowing that Karl Vinland gave his life serving one that was dearest to him. Before departing, Selen is gifted the family heirloom so that she may carry it proudly in honour of the Vinland bloodline. Truth be told, the tale of Maiden Astraea, Karl Vinland, and the Valley of Defilement is one to be remembered as a harsh but necessary lesson that good intention isn't always sufficient. Astraea vowed to serve the valley with a pure heart, but her actions led to dire consequences, both for herself, her companion, and the residents of the valley. In attempting to help ease people's pain, she replaced their physical turmoil with that of mental demise, denying them the faint possibility of withstanding the suffering themselves. Chaos is often all-consuming, a dark shadow that devours the light of hope within man. But it is within human nature to not surrender, to face the darkness and fight to the bitter end. There is no doubt that life within the valley is no life at all, but the maiden had no right usurping the souls of its natives, in turn stripping them of the ability to feel. One mustn't forget, it is the sensation of love, pain, and everything in between that makes us human. Without that, we are as good as dead. This is the fate inflicted on the valley by Astraea. Sadly, her own fate would fare no better. Despite her greatest effort to do good, the maiden would create a monster from a place of innocence and virtue, a demon no less. All of her good deeds would be swallowed by a pit and erased from history. No legacy to speak of, no tale of heroism, and no roses thrown at her feet. It is more true now than ever that no good deed goes unpunished. Having acquired the souls of the Dragon God, Old Monk, Storm King, and Maiden Astraea, one archdemon's soul remains, belonging to Old King Allant. For our final conquest, we travel back to where our journey began. The King's Tower, once a symbol of Boletaria, stands ravaged by the claw marks of drakes, while silver-haired Old King Allant sits on his crumbling throne, witness to the desolation. Upon approaching the tower, three phantoms stand in opposition to the Demon Slayer: Longbow Ulan, Metas, Knight of the Lance, and Alfred, Knight of the Tower. As mentioned previously, the three knights are representative of three demons encountered throughout the journey, now present in their spirit form. Ulan is Phalanx, Metas is the Penetrator, and Alfred is the Tower Knight. Having defeated them as demons, their soul form remains as the final line of defense for trespassers who seek an audience with the king. Even as a trifecta, the knights stand little chance in refusing our entry to the tower. Ascending the staircase to the Old King's Tower, we are halted by a blue dragon. Its fire breath scorches the ground before us, denying progression. In times of need, those of a true companionship prove their worth. Björn offers to take the dragon's gaze, providing us with a narrow window of opportunity to slip past. This, however, comes at the cost of his life. Alternatively, we can choose to stand and fight along with our companion. Together, the might of the Demon Slayer and Björn proved too powerful for the creature of the sky. Nearby, we once again cross paths with Ostrava.
My father is up above. Ha! Well, something like him anyway. A demon in his shape. I began this quest to ask my father his reasons. To drag him back to the path of righteousness. But it seems it was all in vain. Please, kill my father.
Ostrava has come to believe that in his degenerated state, his father is capable only of bringing peril to the world. In truth, the Old King residing in the tower is a false monarch, an archdemon posing in the image of King Allant. Not recognizing the prince, the demon turned its blade on Ostrava, who came unprepared for battle, hoping to reason with his father. In his dying wish, the prince passes the mantle to the Slayer, for they must defeat the demon and rid the world of its tyranny. A final gift is bestowed upon us, a key which opens the Boletarian royal family mausoleum.
Inside the mausoleum lies father's sword, the Demon Brand, twin of Soulbrand. Use it to bring an end to his madness.
Interestingly, only the demon brand is stored within the mausoleum, a blade whose power is indicative of one's humanity. The less demonic the soul of the wielder is, the more powerful it becomes. Upon death, Ostrava yields a rune sword, inscribed as a weapon of the legendary hero. Ironic, considering this so-called legendary hero was in need of aid at every turn of his journey. Perhaps the weapon was inherited rather than earned. Laid to rest, Ostrava appears for the last time in spirit form, a black phantom. No longer of a conscious mind, the prince draws his sword upon the slayer, a foolish choice that would see his end. To earn Demon Brand, one must prove their worth to the founder of Great Boletaria, Old King Doran. The hero Doran, protector of the royal family of Boletaria, lives on forever as a demigod. Residing within the mausoleum, the Everlasting One throws down his gauntlet, challenging the Slayer of Demons to a duel to best determine their worth. The accumulation of our travels has ingrained us with strength, grit, and persistence. Having sharpened our blade with the flesh of countless demons, Old King Doran cannot deny the swordsmanship demonstrated by the Demon Slayer.
I am Old King Doran, and thou hast proven thy strength to me. Step forth and take the king's sword in thy hand.
Encroaching on the false king, we step foot in a dilapidated throne room. Barren of any life, the chamber is occupied by none but one, the man who wielded untold power. Calmly watching over the kingdom from on high was not in fact Old King Gallant, but a demonic impostor who stood in his place. The true king dwells with the Old One. With no exchange of words, a duel is initiated. Dexterous with his movement, the false king leaps into range, clashing his blade with that of the Slayer's. The raw power of his swings direct shockwaves through the air. The Old King is relentless, but so too is the Demon Slayer, who stands their ground, evading the oncoming onslaught and awaiting the opportunity to strike back at a point of vulnerability. The demon, fashioned after the king at the height of his power, utilizes magic within his arsenal, summoning a ball of energy in his left palm and launching forward in an attempt to take hold of the Slayer and drain their soul. Unbeknownst to the demon, pain is a driving force, impelling the Slayer to retaliate tenfold. Drawing on the power of the Demon Brand and the affirmative words of Old King Doran, the Slayer of Demons strikes down the false king, bringing closure to his repressive dominion of Boletaria. In a war against darkness, triumph was achieved through the use of the Demon Brand sword, proving that when light shines in the darkness, darkness is swallowed by its gleam. On obtaining all 5 Archdemon souls, we return to the Nexus for the last time. Here, Yuria expresses misgivings about Sage Frake.
I was branded a witch at a very young age, and have been persecuted ever since. Although I never had ill intentions, this black craft of mine is intrinsically evil. If there is a God, he gave us souls to do good, not to practice witchcraft. My accusers detested my dark arts for good reason, for the path I have taken is tainted. This has been one of my realizations since coming to Boletaria. But I am afraid that Frake, too, has ventured down the wrong path. He has become obsessed with the dark arts.
During her time in Boletaria, Yuria has reconciled with her past as a practitioner of witchcraft, and has grown to understand and accept the cruel treatment she had endured as a child, owing it to the fact that her dark arts were a threat to society and herself. Sage Frake, however, would not come to that realization, instead allowing his lust for power to reach its pinnacle.
The Old One must not be cut off from us. If the Candle Maiden tries to entrap it, kill her. Then absorb the souls of the Old One for yourself. The Old One is an unfathomable vessel. It contains all the souls collected by all demons. You will gain the power of a king, and I will gain knowledge from beyond. And that, my dear friend, is the righteous path.
If there is a lesson to be learned from the events that have transpired within Boletaria, it's that the hunger for power and knowledge will blemish one's character. Good men turned evil, evil men their impudence displayed in full. An undeniable pattern that has proven itself true time and time again. With that in mind, the Slayer of Demons must decide the fate of Boletaria. Do they chart the path initially paved for them, to lull the Old One back to slumber? Or do they consider the alternative choice presented by Sage Frake, and take hold of the ultimate power offered by the Old One? At the centre of the Nexus, the Maiden in Black offers her hand. In an instance, we are pulled into what appears to be an endless void of darkness and fog. A blinding light arrogates our vision, and not long after, we awaken a mysterious land of rubble and ruins. Looking up, we lock eyes with a cosmic entity, the Old One. The Maiden in Black summons the entity through deception, under the guise of presenting the Slayer as a new demon vessel. The manner in which the Maiden converses with the Old One indicates a long-standing bond between the two. After all, she too was once a powerful demon. Proceeding to its lair, a voice echoes through the tunnel.
You have been chosen by the Old One. Will you seek the everlasting demon souls? Or has the monumental blinded you?
Dwelling within the Old One is the real King Gallant. Believing that the world had given up hope, the king took it upon himself to free humanity of their feeble existence. Why fight for a life of pain and suffering when the inevitability of death perpetually looms around us? Everything fades so quickly, turns into legend, and soon oblivion swallows it all. King Gallant serves the Old One as a means of strengthening it to a point where it would be capable of destroying the world. But with such an endeavour, a heavy price awaits. The consequences of such a trade is written all over Gallant, now a mangled weakling, deformed and broken. The enfeebled monarch still clings to the Soulbrand, displaying that despite what he had faced, the king's soul still leans towards the dark. With little effort, the king of Boletaria is slaughtered, allowing the Maiden to begin the process of lulling the Old One back to slumber. It is now that the fate of the world is determined, a choice to be made that will alter the course of time and space, causing a ripple effect that will impact future generations for eons ahead. No human should be burdened with a responsibility of this magnitude, but where others have stumbled and fallen, one must rise above the rest. In one reality, we are enticed by the hypnotizing power of the Old One. Infinite demon souls, endless potential. How can one resist such temptation? The greed of man triumphs forevermore, taking hold of us like it had done to many before. It is true as they say, there is no greater enemy than the one within. Blindsiding the Maiden, the Slayer swings their blade with no warning, killing the one and only being who could banish the Old One. Unchained, the entity is free to wreak havoc upon the world, spreading chaos like a boundless fire, a web of destruction embracing the earth. The world King Gallant had hoped for has come to fruition.
The Old One senses a new and powerful demon by its side. And before long, the world will be engulfed by the deep fog.
The Maiden in Black was one of few demons rivaling the Old One in age. Her death will unquestionably bring strife. A world without order, magic in all forms roaming without restraint, ascending waves of demons moulding the planet to their likeness, a world to mirror the selfishness and unquenchable hunger of mankind. An alternate reality sees a different outcome. With the help of the Maiden in Black, the Slayer of Demons aids in soothing the Old One back to sleep. Having witnessed the complete corruption power can offer, whether through the Old Monk of Latria or Sage Frake the Visionary, we refuse to be held captive by the powers that be. Instead, we turn our back on King Gallant's pessimistic sentiment on life, choosing to embrace the suffering and walk away with our pride and morality intact.
The Old One, along with the Maiden, was swept back into the lulling fog. Boletaria was spared from the demons, but also lost its knowledge of the soul arts. The souls lost during the pandemonium were never retrieved. And today, the unstable world has another monumental to hold its fabric together. A brave new hero of unprecedented power.
In war, there is no substitute to victory. It was either demons or humans who would inherit the world, but that does not exempt triumph from reaping sorrow. With the Old One banished, all that is lost remains unattainable, the perished souls of countless victims forever in the void. Will faith in the church maintain its prominence, or will the world soon realise that their religion is synonymous with that of worshipping demons? Knowledge in the soul arts will be erased from history, but how long before they are rediscovered and brought back to light? If history's cyclical nature is to have any credibility, then all that has transpired will emerge once more. Human nature will always be the greatest threat to face mankind. A species with a tendency to think disproportionately on the ramifications of key events in history. Recency bias shapes our ability to think cognitively, for if wars were remembered in their objective, impartial truth, there would only be one war to speak of. The emergence of the Old One brought to life the first scourge of demons. In response, monumentals were formed to imprison the cosmic entity and guard the fabric of reality. Repeating past mistakes, the Old One was awakened once more, this time by King Allant, thus reigniting the cycle. If suffering was our unwavering fate, written in the stars from the very beginning, then how can one fault the king for surrendering to it? Allant viewed life as beyond saving, an existence marred by pain and tragedy. The one who prospered in war and conquest would be broken by the burden of human existence. Some may argue that his surrender came from a place of strength, choosing to selflessly commit his life to the Old One as a means of ending human suffering. Conversely, his conceit may be that of cowardice, an unwillingness to face the tribulations of life. Ironically, it would be his pampered son Ostrava who would demonstrate that bravery requires only the will of the heart, to not shudder under the weight of adversity. Unlike his father, he was inexperienced in life and unprepared for battle. Still, he embarked on a life-threatening journey in search of truth, knowing that it will likely be his last. As established, what's to come is what's already been. The Old One will inevitably be awoken for a third time, a cycle tethered with the very nature of humanity, an unbreakable thread interwoven through every mistake committed by man. There is no outcome that assures peace, but one may cherish a moment of respite leading up to an outpour of chaos. Every moment of despair is mirrored by that of solace. Even a scorching flame casts a cold shadow. For that very reason, hope can never be abandoned. For when the bells of damnation beckon, and the world cries for help, a nameless hero will emerge from the colourless fog.
Man's memory of history is ever short, and before long he repeated his mistakes, and the short-sighted King Allant once again roused the Old One.
King Allant was overcome by lust for such power, and has placed Boletaria in her present predicament.
The seditious claims that our Lord brought this scourge upon us, they could only be fabrications woven by jealous conspirators.
This is bad. Not a single person left. Why on earth? How did this happen, noble father?
You found yourself a demon soul, did you? Stay the path, and you will soon be a monster yourself.
You soon shall hear the call of the Old One. Then the Candle Maiden shall guide you below the Nexus. She will lull the Old One back to slumber. That is, after all, her purpose.
I shall await thy return, Slayer of Demons. I am here for thee, and thee alone.
You have a heart of gold. Don't let them take it from you.
Thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to our patrons who have allowed us to continue working on this hobby, which we love so much. Without you guys, none of it would be possible. Please click the link in the description to find out more on how to get early access to our videos, receive frequent updates on upcoming projects, and be mentioned in the credits of all of our content.
Thank you to Project Orochi for sponsoring this video. Please visit their website through the link in the description and use code SOULS to get 10% off your order. If you'd like to help us grow our community, please subscribe to our channel. Not only will it be supporting us in creating more content, but you'll be regularly updated on what we're working on next. Leave a like to help spread our videos to a wider audience, and comment down below letting us know what you'd like to see next. Thank you, we'll be back with more soon.